Thanks for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast with a special encore presentation of my interview with Prescott Niles from the Knack from April of 2022. I hope you like what you hear. If you do, be sure to subscribe to it, rate it, share it, review it aggressively with everyone you know. You can also follow on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook for regular updates on future guests. Today, we're brought to you by Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee. Visit their state-of-the-art dealership next to BJ's in Big Y on Memorial Drive, or stop by metrojeep.com and drive home in your new Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram today.
It's Baxie's Musical Podcast.
In 1979, ahead of the Bee Gees, Donna Summer, and the frickin' Village People, the number one song in America was not another disco single. The number one song in America was a rock song that was recorded in a single take. I couldn't even get through the introduction of this podcast in a single take. Nevertheless, this was a song that would become the fastest-selling single to reach gold for Capitol Records in 15 years, back when the Beatles released I Want to Hold Your Hand in 1964. This was a song that was recorded by a band that would go on to receive 2 Grammy nominations, one for Best Rock Performance and one for the Best New Artist. Now, they lost both those awards that night. The Best Rock Performance Grammy went to the Eagles for Heartache Tonight, and the Grammy for Best New Artist went to Ricky Lee Jones, and yet only My Sharona by the Knack was the number one song in the country. It was a rock song in the age of disco, at the beginning of New Wave. It would become one of the most easily identifiable songs of all time, with one of the most easily identifiable bass lines played by my guest today, Prescott Niles. The Knack story is an interesting one, a story of rapid success, huge expectations, and a slow decline that eventually led to the band breaking up in 1982. There have been a few reunions along the way, but in 2006, original drummer Bruce Gary died of lymphoma at the age of 55, and in 2010, guitarist and lead singer Doug Feiger died of cancer at the age of 57. But Prescott Niles has continued to play. In fact, he's been a member of Missing Persons with Dale Bozzio for the last 11 years. And this month, as part of Record Store Day on April 23rd, the Knack will be unveiling a previously unreleased live album called Live from the House of Blues in Hollywood, with a limited edition version being released on baby blue vinyl. Prescott Niles is a guy who has not only had a great career in music, he's got loads of incredible stories culled from the last 40-plus years. In other words, you're in for a real treat. My guest today, Prescott Niles from the Knack on Baxie's Musical Podcast.
How you doing, Michael?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, man. Nice to see you. You know, I'm playing with a Bostonian.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm playing with Missing Persons.
You've been playing with them for years now, right?
Yeah, Doug passed away in 2010, and I played with a few other people, but I like Dale. I've met her before.
So how has that been? That's a band that's been around for a long time. I know, Terry no longer plays with them, but it's still a great band.
Well, the closest I ever got to Terry Bozzio was when he recorded our album. Do you know that?
No.
We did. Yeah, you know that we did our album called Zoom, which is our 4th album, and Bruce had issues with the band, and we looked around and Doug met Terry, and Terry, believe it or not, wanted to play with us, which was, you wouldn't think as good as fusion drummers he is, but he wanted to play with us, and we got together, we rehearsed, we cut most of the songs for the Zoom album, plus a few extra cover songs that came out on the Rhino Greatest Hits album. So he recorded 20 songs with us.
It's got to be kind of nice, though, to be on a stage with a guy that doesn't have a 50-piece drum set.
Well, Terry brought his small kit. It was like 15 pieces. So he graced us, so to speak.
For the space saving, right?
Yeah, Terry enjoyed himself. And honestly, if there's the one thing I don't have, I wish if any of your listeners out there happen to have, we didn't get to Boston in our tour because Rhino didn't know how to promote the new album. But if I don't have any video or any audio of us playing with Terry, which is unbelievable.
Really?
Yes.
That is
so if
unbelievable.
there's anybody out there, I will pay a bounty if anybody finds it.
I got to show you something. I'm sure you see this all the time whenever you get an interview with somebody. This is my version of Get the Knack. And as you can see, I've played the living shit out of this album since 1979. So
really, it's wonderful.
Yeah, and
honestly,
but it's all the tape holding it together. It's seen its road weariness. That's for damn sure.
Well, what I have to give you is giving you a Japanese Get the Knack. How's that?
That would be terrific. But that is one of those records. So I'm of the age where, so 1979,
Did
I
you?
would have been just starting high school, and I
Uh-huh.
remember we had school dances every Friday night, and it was always the same songs. But whenever my Sharona would come out, that place would erupt. It's like the timing of that first record and of my Sharona. It just, you could not have scripted it better for that song to come out and explode the way it does. I don't think like young kids today can point to a song that had that immediate impact. It really is. It's like a remarkable history of just one song.
Well, it's just one song and the album, of
Yeah,
course. But
right.
in retrospect, I saw a documentary a little while ago about disco, and they gave us credit for killing disco, the Knack. And the thing was that song, disco is all about dancing, and Sharona happened to be not by choice. It's a great dance song, and I think that made the transition to the maybe the new wave audience and different bunch of people that dug listening to rock. It made a kind of cool transition. I think in retrospect, I figured that out. People still dance to it.
I think that's absolutely true. I think that's what makes that song so special is people were really dying for guitar music to come back and for guitar music to make you want to dance. And 1979, there wasn't a whole lot of that just yet. It's like you guys just, unlocked the door and then everybody came in and followed you.
Well, yeah, that's true. Blondie was actually when we did our first album. Blondie was in the studio as well with Mike Chapman.
Right.
Mike, we were lucky enough to have Mike produce us, and we benefited greatly from his. He saw us live, and he said, I don't want to produce you. I just want to capture what you guys do live and get it on record. And I give him a lot of credit for that.
I want to ask you about Mike Chapman because it's actually, I think it's a really fascinating story. I mean, you guys are being courted by nearly every record company in America. You probably could have been produced by any producer in the world at that point, considering all the interest there was in this band. Here you are being produced by a guy who was primarily known as a songwriter, and he did a marvelous job with both you and Blondie.
And Pat Benatar,
Right, right.
among the Nick Gilder, and my goodness. Well, I lived in England from 73 to 75, and I was part of the glam period.
Yep.
And, listening, I had no idea that half of those or three-quarters of all those pop songs for The Sweet, for, Susie Quattro, for Slade, were all written by Mike and Nikki Chin, which is odd because, I just, it was there. But we started playing live in terms of record labels. Early on, Capitol, somebody named Bruce Ravid, was one of the early people that came down to see us. He just loved the band, and gradually he'd bring down the people that worked in the mailroom, the secretaries, the other people in the building. So what really started just as an initial interest by Bruce, it kind of grew. Capitol, I think one of the reasons we went with Capitol is because everybody kind of knew the band. Polygram offered us $1 million. Some
Mm,
other record companies offer us a lot of money, but as you know, when you take a lot of money, you owe a lot of money.
right.
And we didn't, because of the confidence in the band, and as Mike as well, we didn't need a lot of money. Capital, I mean, I think it was 100,000, but basically because we did the album for 17,000, we hardly, we didn't owe anything literally. And there's a story, people rewrite history, especially people didn't maybe like our success having so quick. They said Capitol found us, groomed us to be the Beatles, paid for our promotions. But, we did, hundreds of shows in LA, 2 sets a night, and basically making no money. So we were not handpicked to be the Beatles nor anybody else. That hit later, I think, because of our success.
I was listening to another interview that you had done, and you talked about being in England and then making the trip to Los Angeles. You started off in New York, but you met Bruce, you got this band together, and there was a conversation I heard where we discuss the chemistry of these four musicians, Doug
Yes.
and Burton, and I hear that a lot with other musicians. That chemistry, it either happens or it develops when new guys come in. But with you guys, it was immediate. It's like you are playing with these three other guys, and all of a sudden you're starting thinking, hey, this could actually work. What was it about the Knack that said to you, all right, something pretty special is about to happen here?
Well, if you read, I guess, that interview or whatever it was, Bruce and I had played together on different occasions, but it didn't last very long. One time we played, he was going to come back. I came back from England with Jeffrey Mitchell, whose group I was playing in. We auditioned drummers. We wanted Bruce to come back, but he ended up going back to England to play with Jack Bruce. And then I stayed in England. He came back to America. Then he wanted me to come back and join the band he was in. I came back, played with him. Then he went back to England to play with Mick Taylor's band. I mean, Bruce had the most professional cred out of any of us, by the way. I mean, we had some flirtation with it, but and Bruce called me in '78 and said, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. We want kind of look like Paul McCartney. You can play like M Whistle." And I just raised my hand, of course, right? Of course, I didn't solo very much, but still. And when I met the guys, first time we played together, I mean, mainly because of Bruce as well, but playing with Burton, who I found out is one of the great guitar players, and to this day is unsung or not underappreciated for sure. And Doug was a great front man and songwriter and lyricist as well. So when I closed my eyes and I never felt that buzz, and I had played with great musicians, for some reason the chemistry was just right, the energy was right, and I think it was our time.
When you got a guy like Doug, who's just a great songwriter, and for anyone who thinks that the Knack is a one-hit wonder, I defy you to listen to the rest of the record to find out how false that is, because there are just so many great songs on those first couple of records. When you've got a guy in the band like that, and you're just starting out, and you're hearing what he's coming up with, there's got to be an excitement about the material you're working with, and it sounded like you guys worked very, very quickly together. Like there wasn't a whole lot of overthinking anything. It just, these songs came together quickly, they recorded quickly, and they were out quickly.
Well, one thing regarding that, when we started playing some of the songs in the first set, there's a live thing of us at the Whiskey. Somebody shot on black and white. And, there's a number of the songs that we started with didn't end up with us. Songs like Sharona, Frustrated, A Good Girl's Done was actually was on a demo that Doug Burton and Bruce did that was rejected by Capitol 3 years earlier. Thought I'd give you a caveat on that. And Let Me Out was also written later, as was Selfish. Some of those songs were influenced by Doug's obsession with Sharona.
Yeah.
Well, we all have girls we're obsessed with, and I think Doug figured out a way to make it relatable by every young man in America. But it wasn't deliberate. It just happened. So those songs came when the band started playing, and we got our own sound, and that had a lot to do with the progression from just really good players into molding into and playing a bunch of shows as well. Really solidified the endurance, the improvisational nature of the band, the ability to really perform. And none of us, really knew that. Let's say unhinged performances without holding anything back. And that had a lot to do with, all of us.
There was also a couple of things along the way that helped you out. I mean, your first shows together, I think were 1978, the summer of 78. And then all of a sudden you're playing in clubs and suddenly Bruce Springsteen and Tom Petty are joining you on stage. I mean, those are a couple of validating moments that would be that way for any band, but that had to be very important for guys like you. Ray Manzarek would be another one too.
Oh yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, because when I do interviews, a lot of people don't understand that one of the being a great musical band and performance wise, I had no idea that it was Eddie Money first who jammed with us at Starwood, and we did 2 tickets to Paradise with him. And then Petty jammed with us. We did Mona Not Fade Away. Springsteen happened to be at the Troubadour, and I think Bruce had met him maybe, or somebody in his group or something. And then he jammed with us in the same song. Stephen Stills also jammed with us and wanted to produce us. And it wasn't right, but we had fun playing with him.
Yeah.
And also Ray Manzarek knew Bruce Gary very well, and to do 3 Doors songs with him was just amazing. So the credibility we got as musicians is overlooked, and they were like icons back then. They were also forming their careers,
Right.
All of us were, and it was just really I'm grateful they did. But it was a camaraderie thing, like they did in England too back in the day when groups would be friendly with each other. And they jam with each other, and there wasn't that kind of cutthroat competition, I guess, you know?
I read another interview you did where you said that many of the songs on that first record and some of the ones that were held over to the second record were mostly done in a single take. That seems remarkable to me.
Yes. Well, I will contribute. One thing is the one hit wonder thing I get. And I think after the second album, that became more prominent. And I'll explain later why. Uh, we were lucky. Now, first of all, we had no expectations. Again, Mike had come, there were other producers we had thought of. And I think somehow Mike's name came up and we invited him down. He just said, look, guys, you're such a great band. I really want to record you live. So we went in the studio. Mike made a decision. Now, Mike is a great producer, but being a great producer means either you don't produce, overproduce, and let it happen, or you add production. It depends on the band you're with, right?
Right.
And Mike really just wanted to get us live. And I give him credit for that. Now, he was the only one who said Sharona was a number one, which is very interesting considering Capitol did not release Sharona. I don't know if you know this. We were in Europe at the time, and Capitol gave the album to radio. Sharona became the most requested song in America in 2 days, you know? And as a result of that, Capitol and their way, well, here's what it was. First of all, most new bands are broken. Usually they release one single that gets people interested, and then they release the hit. It's kind of a formula. With us, it was completely backwards. We gave the album to radio, and their choice, Sharona, was the song. So Capitol had to do a rush release of the single of My Sharona. And the good thing about it is more people heard the album. As you mentioned, there's a lot of great songs. And the other way, a lot of people may have just heard the single and now listen to the album. This way, they had to listen to the album. And as a result, people appreciated the songs and the songcraft. And also, Sharona was the first song in the second side. Another, it wasn't the first song and the first side. And that had to do with the fact that, somebody asked me, well, did you know it was going to be a hit? I said, no. I mean, we got to understand, none of us had a hit record. We had been in groups that were good and played with great people, but we had no expectations. We had great hope. But, you can't plan this. Capitol didn't plan it. They had a formula maybe. And so it was really exciting. And none of it was pre-hype. The pre-hype was more from press. It had nothing to do, nobody picked Sharona to be a hit. And when it became a hit, then everybody started catching up. That first album, I mean, because we were a really good band, we weren't one-hit wonders. As you meant, we were one-take wonders. And a lot of those songs in there were just like, okay, guys, let's go. And we'd run the song through. Mike goes, okay, Sharona we recorded on the second day. And Mike would usually, set up the, they kind of knew what we, first day is getting sound. So Mike came in and go, okay, guys, let's run it down. So we played Sharona beginning to end. And Mike goes, okay, let's do another song. And we go, what do you mean? He goes, no, we got it. So we went in there and we did our run through. See, the thing is, not only because we played the song live, because the musicianship was so technically brilliant that it wasn't about that. It was just getting the spirit of the song. So Mike's whole idea was when we heard it, we go, yeah, it's pretty damn good. We want to do it again. Nope. So Mike knew the difference between something that was so spontaneous that he didn't have to worry about. There was no, the only punching was maybe Burton had a flub or two. Maybe Doug wanted to fix a couple of pitching issues. It was a completely live track.
But that's the amazing part about it. I mean, here you have a song that was like so purely recorded right off the bat, and it winds up being the fastest selling single to gold that Capitol had since the Beatles. That never happens. It certainly doesn't happen today, and I can't recall when it's happened since.
Maybe Milli Vanilli. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, but they didn't take this one. They didn't take this one away from you.
Well, the weird thing is, like I said, there was no real pre-hype. Radio wasn't paid money; they were just given the album.
Right.
And people, critics, when they decided to turn on us, literally, our success was too quick. We didn't pay our dues, even though all of us paid our dues from all the bands we played with. None of us had money. We were not household names either. So it wasn't any of that. But and I think that's maybe overlooked. We cut our album for $17,000. We mixed it. We mastered it. Now Blondie was recording down the hall, and Blondie were a great band, and I loved saying hello to Deborah Harrer every day. She was definitely pleasing on the eyes,
Yes.
and she was wonderful, and they were great guys. But they worked at a different pace, and maybe there was more production involved. But we were in and out of there like in no time. Unfortunately, when record companies found out we recorded the album for so cheap, they started telling their bands, "Hey, the Knack did it for 17. Why don't you guys do it?" And then they started to go, "Screw the Knack," because it was weird. I didn't even understand why that was happening. And maybe there was a bit of jealousy, but we paid our dues. And again, I'm so happy that people got to know the album. So the one hit thing is understandable. And by the way, Good Girls Don't was, borderline top 10.
Yeah, and it was a great song. And even the follow-up album, but the Little Girls Understand was still a gold album. It just
I've
it
got them on my wall.
yeah. Of course you
I
do.
mean, I'm look. Yeah, but that was never, that was never our goal. I mean, yeah, after the first album, sure, but the big problem was, first of all, Capitol didn't want us to do there was no rush to do a second album. I figured, at least frustrated, maybe selfish with editing, would have been a really good single. Some people maybe liked other songs we did. I think that was we didn't take advantage of the songs on the album, and Mike even attested to that. He came to a listening party a few years ago at a friend's house, and we listened to vinyls, and we listened to that album together. And Mike said that should have been a single. That should have been a single. So for some reason, I guess because Good Girls Don't was edited because of a couple of lines that were not, worthy of,
Right.
censorship, and that was weird in a way. He didn't want to cut lyrics, even though Sharona had its own brand of it.
Right.
And that's very important. We should have had another single. If we're doing a second album, we needed a single to put out. You cannot underestimate the fact that with a song like Sharona, you better have a song better. If not better, better be damn as good. And I think that was a critical mistake by Capitol and the band. I have my own reservations about it, but I didn't think it had the commercial appeal, and the lyric, frankly, was a bit, sensual.
Which isn't always a bad thing, but I think you're right. I think there were a couple things that went against you. First of all, I think whenever you have either an album or a single that sells that much or sells that well that quickly, there's always this sense that you got to duplicate immeasurable success. And even as a member of the band, there's got to be a lot of pressure that you're putting on yourself, saying, can we
Mhm.
can we top that? And in nearly every case of anyone I've ever talked to, it's always like it's an unattainable thing to expect. It could just happen. It's really
Mhm.
hard to duplicate that success.
Yeah. Well, the honesty of how it happened the first time was quite remarkable. And again, we easily could have had another single. I don't know if you realize this, but we were nominated for 2 Grammy Awards:
Right.
best song, and best new artist. Now, to not go to the Grammys and miss up maybe playing at the Grammys. See, there's business things you have to do. Our success was one of those things that happened apart from hype, even though we're accused of hype, and apart from asking for favors. We created our own niche by not engaging in the business world and kissing ass. We could have played on that show and done other rock shows at the time. I think we were besieged by so many offers, like Mork and Mindy, for instance, like Fridays,
Hmm.
like Kirshner. I think the paralysis of doing the right thing and the people calling us upstarts, or they're, what the hell, these guys, I think it started a backlash. If we had done the Grammys, for instance, you see, the thing is, we could have wrote that album a few more months. We had not done any American television. We did television in Australia, New Zealand, Italy, France, London. So there's no, if we rode Sharona for a while and even had a video out, and by the way, we just missed MTV. So if we had a thing on MTV, certainly would be a different conversation today.
Right.
But so not only did it slow the momentum of the band, it gave more criticism than needed. And again, you cannot overestimate. Like I said, when you have a single like that, you just can't put out another single and assume it's not it was the only thing about the two songs is that they're in the key of G. I mean, I've read critiques going, well, it's a sounded like Sharona. It's not. It's a riff, but the bridge section is kind of like Led Zeppelin. It's got a feel to it. But more than that, it was a really good song, but it wasn't an A hit.
It's funny to me because I have read and have heard this time and time again, this comparison between the Knack and the Beatles, and
Yeah.
to me, I guess I can understand in 1979 the desire to find the next Beatles from Capitol's perspective, but the reality is, I think you guys had more in common with a band like Cheap Trick than you had with the Beatles.
Yeah. Yeah. We sounded more like the Who and the Kinks in some respects.
Yeah,
Bruce's drumming is not Ringo. We only had one lead singer. I mean, I'm just, if we had a Beatles thing to it, then yeah. But the way we played, Doug was a front man. He had more of an antagonist attitude, very much like Johnny Rotten. There's a song we did called Art War. Doug had a great punk routine. He wasn't trying to, maybe there's some gestures of Lennon. I played, I was not Paul. I love Paul, and if we were appropriately, I'd maybe model his bass playing. But I kind of danced around a lot, and Burden's guitar playing was not George Harrison. And again, my Sharona, unfortunately, when the album came out, people heard the whole solo, and that's a brilliant solo. And again, one of the greatest solos for pop bands ever. And because of the single cut the solo in half, I think a lot of people never heard, even though the half of the solo is great. But I think the musicianship and another thing, going back to the thing about cutting the song live, the song maybe starts in one tempo. We go to the bridge, we push it a bit. You see, that's why playing to a click track has limitation. A producer may have gone, let's do it to a click track. No, because there was natural speed ups. Coming into the solo, it sped up a little. The first solo, by the way. And then after that, we go into the long solo, and there's sections we really push it. So we may have pushed it 4 beats ahead. By the time we came back and stopped it and started the song again, it was exactly the same tempo as we started it. Bruce was such a great drummer, and a lot of producers would have just cut and paste. They would say, let's take the first intro and make it the end out. You go, no, we don't have to.
but I mean, thank goodness you had a producer that could tell the difference. It didn't force that on you because I mean, you could have taken away a whole texture away from the band by insisting upon certain things like a click track, like strings, or whatever it would have been. I mean,
Well, the second album, there were strings, and
yeah,
How
but
Can Love Hurt So Much?
right, but
And that made me, well,
but you know what I
yeah.
mean. I mean, I think it takes a special ear to say this doesn't need this. All it really needs is for us to get that raw sound of this song or
Yeah,
that song.
it was wonderful. Even I think Doug said in an interview once, well, Mike just moved dials and something. Yeah, but to be a really great producer, it's know what to do and what not to do. If something sounds great, why are you going to screw with it? Now, when we did the second album, Mike wasn't fully there. There were some business issues, some marital discrepancies. How's that for a word for it? Maybe it had to do with Tanya Tucker coming to the studio. I don't know, but and I think if Mike put his foot down and said, no, this ain't coming out, I think that would have maybe got people's attention. Mike had other business things going on. We actually recorded the album pretty quick, and it was mixed in England. I wasn't there, and neither was Burton. There was a difference in the album. We were really close. Now, when Doug got Sharona, she'd come to the studio a lot, and which was great. He'd sing to her, and great, great, great. But when the album was, the engineer we had to go back to England. His wife was having a baby. So Doug, Mike, and the engineer went back to England to mix the album. And I never asked Mike if he wanted, hey, Mike, do you think this should be a single? Because Mike was not as engaged as he was. And that was the difference to begin with. And me and Bert and Bruce didn't like the mix. It didn't sound as sharp. It didn't sound as powerful as the first album. So we had our own issues, actually. But it came back, and it was almost like, we got it, let's go. And in retrospect, I think even though the performances are good, and you would know the difference, and the songs were good, but it wasn't like we had 2 albums worth of material. Some of those songs we did have in the past, and some we didn't. But again, without a number 1 or number 10 song that's going to grab people, I think that was kind of like, digging our own proverbial grave.
Do you say that that's maybe one of the reasons why things started to fracture? because of
Absolutely.
exactly that?
It wasn't the pressure of playing or writing. It was the forced era of not taking. We could have taken 5 months. That album was still. It came out in June, right? It
Hmm.
was number one all summer. So we don't have to put out an album 5 months later. And if we did, we should be here to promote it. So that, and not even in retrospect, I kept journals and I kept going, why, so things like that are important. It's not that we lousy or anything, but we made bad choices. And it seemed like nobody understood that. And you have a manager to guide you. And maybe he should have put his foot down, maybe.
Once the band did break up, it's not like you didn't stay busy. You stayed very, very busy, whether it was Missing Persons or Gary Myrick or
No,
any of the other things that you had
well,
done.
no, the group broke up. I joined Josie Cotton. I was in Valley Girl. That was my debut, man. And I did a very cool album with her. It's called From the Hip, and it's a great album. She had some play in MTV, by the way. And I liked playing with her, and I liked. It's really funny. When I joined her band, I did 8 TV shows versus none for the Knack in America. So you figure that. But she was wonderful.
Yeah.
And then also, Bruce Burton and I put our own group together. We called it The Front, and we had a lead singer who was not a lead singer. He was an actor named Stephen Bauer, who had fame from Scarface and a number of other movies.
Right. Yeah.
He could sing a little bit, but we met this manager who was working with him, and we started rehearsing, and it was we could have had a deal. He wasn't a great singer, but he looked great. So we basically, well, first of all, we broke up first. The second time was with Steve Bauer. We broke up, and that was it. We the greatest thing we did was to play the Forum. A year before that, we're playing, the Troubadour, and then we're playing the Forum and sold it out in 2 hours. The fans in LA were it was the best show. And one of the cover songs we did was "We Love You," which we ended the show with, the Stones song, which was wonderful. And so we kept it together. And meeting Britt Eklund afterwards at an after show party is one of my fondest memories. Let alone going to Disneyland with her. That's a whole nother story.
Really?
But yeah, it's really it was very good. You never know what's going to happen, literally. And it's wonderful. But anyway, we did break up, and when Lennon met, I even hate to use any of the words assassinated, or all of it still hurts. And it was just, so we were going over. Well, I called Doug and say, look, I know you've got your resentments and attitude. I know we all got our own thing. We got to do something about this. So we really rallied together, a lot to do with John, because we're all emotionally, we're all on the same, I hate to use the word page. We're in the same pit of despair. I mean, even now, even saying it is bizarre. How did that happen? And we know how it happened. But so I got together with Doug. We all decided, hey, let's give it one more shot. Or let's give it. Now, we did have a 3-record deal with Capitol. So it wasn't like we had to go get a new record label. So we figured out Jack Douglas was a great producer to begin with because of Aerosmith and other people's work. And because he did work with John Lennon, that had a special mystique to it. And we had no idea that Jack would accept to produce us, but we reached out to him. And Jack said, yeah, you're a great band. I want to work with you. And I was like, what a miracle that is. And we started work with Jack. And I got to tell you, sonically, production wise, where needed is apart from Get the Knack, because it was an amazing album, because of the live thing, this is the best recorded produced album we ever did. But in contemporary terms, if it came out today, it sounds as good as anybody else.
I mean, I think anytime that you get guys back together and you're doing it for the right reasons, I mean, a lot of really good things can happen. I mean, you do hear of a lot of, reunions that are not, other than not successful, but, that it could be just a money grab, or it could be just, they're doing it for other reasons other than just getting back together, restoring old friendships and making great music together. But it is kind of nice to hear that even though the death of John Lennon may be a catalyst to have gotten you together.
It was a catalyst because there was a lot of ego and resentment going on at the time. So it was.
But you still got there. And you did get together a couple other times before Doug passed away, too. So, it did continue on.
Well, Round Trip, again, whether it was commercially successful or not, again, they picked the wrong single. They picked the country ballad. You'll hear the album. You should write me and tell me what song you would have released. The songwriting was really good, and the music, and we did songs where one track we sounded like Steely Dan. Not saying we were, but there was some real sophisticated chords. There was a song that had a funk thing to it. We were really proud of it. We did a really good tour, and we got the critics thought we were really good. So we had no commercial success, unfortunately, but the experience of working with Jack and getting his thumbs up, like you're a great band, at least meant a lot to us in some level.
Yeah.
And after that, we broke up, did some other things in the meantime, did a showcase. Actually, Pat Torpey, when Bruce quit the band, Pat Torpey started playing. Now, Pat Torpey ended up with Mr. Big,
Right.
A great band with great musicians. So we were just doing showcases, and I said, Pat, go for it, because I knew Billy Sheehan was. Later on, Pat was our drummer for the last 4 years of the band, by the way. That's why I mentioned it.
Right.
So we were just figuring out what to do. We did a few demos together. We figured out, Bruce kind of said he was doing other things. So Bert and I and Doug started getting together. We did some demos with Val Garay, and then Don was a good friend of Doug. He knew him from Detroit. So Don said, "Look, you guys want to record? I'll produce you." So we got a deal from Charisma Records, and we did Serious Fun. And Serious Fun did have a top 10 FM song. It didn't cross over, but it Rocket of Love. It was pretty cool video as well. But again, it didn't do much, but we did get exposure again. And because Reality Bites had come out after that, we were able to do a tour because Sharona entered the charts again, top 100. Can you believe that?
I believe it.
Now, did you know what the competing movie was? This is a mouthful. You'll see. So before Ben Stiller, called us and talked about it, Tarantino wanted to use that song in Pulp Fiction. Unfortunately, the scene they had in mind was a hillbilly rape scene in the pawn shop. And nobody knew that Tarantino would produce a classic forever. But I could not live with the fact that every time somebody hears that song, they might think of that with the Confederate flag and all that.
Yeah, no, I can see the hesitation on that one.
That would destroy the song to a lot of people. Thankfully, we did. I have on my wall. I actually have a platinum cassette from Sharona for the soundtrack of that. How's that?
Not bad.
and a CD. But because of that, and I loved how they used it. In the scene they picked. So that gave us ability to tour America again, which is fantastic.
That's great.
And Charisma unfortunately fell apart. It lost funding. So the album had a lot of legs on it. It was well produced, and the musicianship is extraordinary. But we really didn't have an AM crossover song. So but we were proud of the album, and that's that incarnation, so to speak.
But you're not the only band that had that problem with Charisma too. I mean, there were a number that.
Oh,
Number of bands that were waiting to be broken, that Charisma at that point in their history just simply couldn't accommodate.
Yeah. So after that, again, that was another kind of breakup period for a while, because Billy Ward was our drummer. He's from New York, great player, really cool jazz. He could play anything, session drummer. So we went through that period of, whatever. I did my other we all did our own things, literally. Different people, sessions or something. And Burton was very talented. He was writing musicals and trying to get them produced. Yeah. He had a great mind. And to write musicals, you really got to understand what they are, theatrical appeal. And he had a lot of talent. So he was doing his thing. Doug started producing people. I was working with other people. So we got back together and started playing around with Bruce again. We played the Viper Room, and Rhino Records really were interested. Now, the manager we had was Danny Sugarman. I don't know if you know who Danny was.
Yeah.
From the Doors,
Yeah.
Managed and wrote books. So Danny said, I want to manage you guys. And he said, I want you to, Doug had done a solo album he's going to release. And Danny goes, no, you guys should write new songs. So we all got together and started, like, the first time in years working together, the three of us. And luckily, I there was a song I had written I submitted it for That Thing You Do, the movie. And I wrote the song and had Bill Hudson, who was a friend of mine at the time, sing on it for me. And we demoed it. and they had the soundtrack. They had all the songs picked out already. And so that was the song I brought into the Knack. And I go, what do you think? And they go, yeah. So that song ended up in the album Zoom. And one reason I'm mentioning it, not to brag, but I do have a voice, by the way. And that song is the digital single that is off our live album, by the way.
Oh, no kidding.
And that's why I referenced it.
Yeah.
But we got together and we started writing. And so that album was engineered and all produced. And Terry Bozzio, Doug had met him and goes, hey, Bruce left the band. And Terry was interested, believe it or not, and came in. We cut a bunch of songs with Terry, and he liked playing with the band and agreed to tour with us. And people go, he'll never play with you guys. He doesn't play rock, meaning straight rock. Some of the cuts on the album are straight rock. Terry was brilliant. I love working with him, by the way. We started touring. Rhino didn't know how to promote the album. But can I give you one Twilight Zone moment?
Of course.
Very important. So Doug's brother, Jeffrey, was an attorney. I don't know if you know who he was. He had represented some controversial clients.
Yes, he did.
Okay. So so often he'd introduce us when we played shows, right?
Okay.
So we're playing in Detroit, and before we played, he comes up to the dressing room, say hello to everybody, and has some old guy with him, and I thought he was the grandfather or the uncle or something. And I'm hanging with Burton. Me and Burton always had this like sympathetic, like vibe together. When something wasn't right, we both said, "Oh crap," So the guy started being introduced, and it was Jack Kevorkian, Dr. Death. So I know people have odd moments in their lives.
Right.
That was an odd one. Why is Jack Kevorkian in the Knack's dressing room? Now, I had nothing against the ethics. I just felt like this is not rock and roll. So Terry shook his hands. Doug shook his hands. I went in the corner and looked at Bird and I go, we're fucked, Now, what happened was 3 days later, Doug started getting sick. And now, of course, he could have gotten the flu anyway. But his voice, first time we had to drop keys. His song couldn't sing very well. Terry got bronchitis a week later, and then the tour was over.
Oh, wow.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for Dr. Death in our dressing room. I know it's cool. I had to tell you that story, okay?
Well, hopefully that's not what did you guys in.
But it was an odd confluence of things. So there you go. That's Jack Kevorkian meets the Knack.
That's unbelievable. I did want to ask you about the new live album. Really
Great
interesting.
idea.
Yeah. It's live at the House of Blues in Hollywood. This is a show from 2001, I think.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Tell me about that show.
Well, we got the new deal. We got a new drummer, Jones. Now the thing. I don't know if you ever saw Funhouse. It was the video. Have you seen it at all? Okay. So that's the lineup. Now, when we did that show, we were releasing a new record for Smile. Now, it's the first time we played together with the new drummer, Holmes Jones. He was a younger guy who kind of looked like Elvis. That's why if you saw the video of him, he was great. He was a wild man, and he looked like Elvis, old sideburns. He's from the South. He was great, but you don't see that on the live album. But that was the first show we played in a while as the Knack,
Right.
And it was, and listening to it, I didn't know they recorded it, nor did I know, until Tony called me from Smile. We've been friends, and he said he found this tape and people want to put it out. And I go, great. Not only that, but a double album vinyl plus a CD and streaming.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't believe it. That's like found gold for me because I never remembered the show. I knew it's after 9/11. I knew that it was a strange time, not as strange as COVID, that's for sure. But if we were in New York, it would have been more surrealistic. But at least in LA, it was, people asked me, I said it was an exciting show, it was packed, and people really got into it. So the album has a lot of songs from each of our albums, by the way.
I listened to it, and I mean, you guys sound explosive in it. I mean,
Exactly.
for a band that had not played for a while, it sounded like you guys were playing at the top of your game. It sounds terrific.
It was exciting. Yeah. I mean, technically there are issues. It was a board mix rather than audience and board. However, I listened to it the other night again because I'm a bit critical, but I got into it and I go, damn, that's not bad. Look, and that's solo. Now, people ask me, how come we did Tequila Break On Through? And why did you do Last Train to Clarksville, for instance? And we always did covers because we can just learn it and do it. And we knew them all. But a lot of times we jam at rehearsals, you know. So one day, Burden, we'd schooling around, and Burden's a great slide player, by the way. And nobody knows even how great he is anyway. But we started fooling around, and Burden did, you know, Tequila. And then because the chord changes are the same, Doug chimed in with, Break On Through. And that's when we started doing the live. And that solo Burden plays, which is a 4-minute solo, is classic. And I listened to it and I got goosebumps because I don't remember, because we do a lot of shows through the years and I don't hear every solo Burden did, or maybe things I did, or but man, he was brilliant that night. So
Yeah.
if you're a guitar enthusiast, check it out. But I'm glad it's out. I'm glad, we live again, so to speak. I'm signing, I'm going to see Record Day. I'm going to go to a couple of places in LA, and I'm just grateful that we get a chance to talk and even talk about this stuff.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. Also like the limited edition baby blue vinyl. I mean, I like that kind of stuff. I don't have the necessarily the means to buy all that kind of stuff, but I love the effort of well thought out packaging.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's great.
And that album cover, by the way, that's only the three of us. Now, some people ask what happened. Well, at that time we shot the pictures we shot. That wasn't even for this album cover. That was just a publicity shot. But because Tony said this is a great picture, we didn't have a drummer at that time. So basically, that picture was what we used. We did have pictures taken with Jones, but that was a great album cover. And by the way, Randy St. Nicholas, who's a dear friend of mine, she shot the first album cover. Now, she was an artist, and she was married to a good friend, Nick St. Nicholas from Steppenwolf. That's when I first met her. And she was an artist, not a photographer. But she shot basically, except for the second album, all our album covers, except for Serious Fun, by the way. And also, I'm asked about the first album. Some people goes, did you deliberately do like a Meet the Beatles copy? I go, no. I go, Randy said, stand here and, do different poses. And it was that.
I'll tell you what, I wouldn't discount the idea of putting tape all over the first cover of the album. Looks like I got all worn out and torn.
Well, you're gonna get you. I'll get you. I tell you what, I'll send you that, and I'll send you the single.
That'd be
I'll
great.
send you the 45 of Sharona on the cover.
Wow, that sounds great. Correct me if I'm wrong about this. You also had a chance to meet and play with George Harrison too.
So when I lived in England 73 to 75. One of my good fortunes of meeting somebody was Rose Taylor, who was married to Mick Taylor.
Right.
And I was into chess, so was Mick Taylor. But, all I wanted to do was play with him. And you got to understand, I'm like 20, 21, and all I was interested in is jamming with people. And I did get a chance to play with Mick once, but he also was ingesting something that would make chess moves take like 2 hours to make a move. And it begins with H. But anyway.
Gotcha. When the Rolling Stones say you've got to go because you've got a drug problem, that must really mean something. Yeah.
But anyway, so we go out dancing a lot. And because it was a private club called Tramps, and the manager of the band I was in while I was in England, actually, his father was a famous actor named Stuart Granger. So Jamie knew a lot of the people. We used to get into private clubs. So how I met George Harrison at first was I was dating this girl who was best friends with Derek Taylor's secretary. And Derek Taylor was the Beatles publicist and George Harrison. So I met George Harrison first dancing with him. I said, I danced with George because everybody would dance together, right? You
Sure.
go out, I'm dancing with the girl I'm with, she's dancing. And so I met George and hey, it's Prescott, hey, how you doing, that was it. So cut to 1986. So I got a call to do the session at Sound City, and the producer said, look, I'm not going to tell you who it is. I go, I don't care who it is. What's the deal? I didn't, who knows, right?
Right.
Just come down. So I went down there and I went in there and he said, by the way, Prescott, just it's George Harrison. Don't be weird or anything. I go, I'm not weird. I met him. I wasn't some high school kid, and by the way, nevertheless, it was still that like, okay, where am I kind of thing, right? So I was introduced to George, and we kind of pleasure to meet you. And I go, by the way, I don't know, I'm sure you don't remember, but I danced with you in London. And he goes, I said, Kathy, something, you're done or something. He goes, oh yeah, right. because they were really close. But I said, "Oh yeah," he said, "Oh yeah, you were the Knack because I dig your record." So that broke the ice for me. I wasn't some guy coming in there.
Right.
So that was great. I felt comfortable, and George was, was in the control with him. Now Jim Keltner was drumming, who is a legend to begin with, and I had played with great drummers, before that. But Jim Keltner was strumming, and Lawrence Struber was playing guitar. And his tour ended when McCartney was arrested in Japan. By the way, what a way for a tour to end, right?
No kidding.
So George ran the song down, and George hadn't really been recording. So this was for Shanghai Surprise, by the way. And the song we did was someplace else. So the thing was, I'm in the studio. I got a chord chart written out for me, and George Harrison usually has some odd chord changes. So I'm looking at the chord chart, and basically I got what I'm doing, but I try to be inventive. I got Jim Keltner on drums, who usually plays very back in the pocket. He's a great drummer, and Lawrence playing guitar. So I was praying and go, okay, God, I'm putting you on the line here, okay? I know I've had great success. I'm crapping in my pants. Okay, because the thing I feared most, I knew I was a great player. I didn't want him to stop the tape because of me. And I've done enough sessions to know where if a drummer screws up, a guitar player, or I may hit wrong notes, they'd stop the tape. So I knew I had to get an A plus on my exam. Luckily, I didn't make any screw ups. I played way back in the pocket. I added a couple of lines that I thought were cool, and nobody stopped the tape. That was my victory.
There you go. Good for you.
And people will relate to that, not because it was George, but because it was, I wanted to make a good impression. So after we did that, I was there for a second day. I still have a photograph of the invoice when they paid me for the session to prove I didn't dream it up. just saying, right?
Yeah, listen,
By the way,
you got to prove your history.
That's right. And it wasn't a lot. It was only for $350, but hey, it was the best $350 I ever made.
For $350 though, I probably would have kept the check and just framed it forever.
Now, well, I could still have it with Dark Horse and the thing on top, right?
Exactly.
Now, here's the thing. I didn't take any pictures.
Oh.
It's, I could have had a camera, but I didn't want to. You understand? It was almost like I wanted to. In Lawrence Struber, who I'm friends with, I said, "Didn't you take any photos?" He goes, "No." And I'm going, because I would have loved the photo of it. Well, but it was one of those things where I didn't want to. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, because you never want to be a fanboy in front of your heroes. And I totally get that. And there have been times when I've really had to fight back that urge too. But no, I totally get that.
But in retrospect, I wish I did.
Yeah.
But there you go. That's life. But anyway, that's my wonderful George Harrison experience that I do treasure, because I spent a couple of days with him, and it was real. And it was, and as a person, he's funny as heck anyway. And he's just one of those people that, again, sorely missed. And I felt great sadness for that as well, of course,
Now tell me about the Woodstock story. I want to hear this too.
You sure of this? Okay.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
All right. So I used to go up. Now, first of all, I used to go to Fillmore all the time.
Okay.
So Fillmore, that was my college education in music. So I saw everybody play. I saw what it was like, to be. I could see Led Zeppelin one night with Iron Butterfly. Albert King opens up for. I saw Jimi Hendrix with Sly Stone.
Wow.
Every group that the Rascals I like. I saw the Fudge play there. Everybody that was anybody played. So I got my education, what music I like. They had folk music there, Richie Havens played there. I mean, everybody. So I grew up knowing what I like. Now, really quick, I had met Velvet Turner. Velvet Turner, I did my first album with Velvet, and he knew Jimi Hendrix. And that's how I got to meet Jimi Hendrix, briefly,
Right.
Which was a whole nother thing, Are you aware of the Velvet Turner album?
I have heard of it. I have not heard that album.
Well, really quickly, the reason we got that deal was, now I had met Jimmy through Velvet, and Velvet did authentically know Jimmy. So because of that, I was able to get backstage and go to jam sessions. Long story. So I came to California in '70, and when Jimmy died, which was unbelievable. Jimmy of all, Janis, whatever, but Jimmy was like this, I hate to say, godlike person. Because nobody was writing songs like that, let alone play. He doesn't get enough credit as a songwriter, by the way.
Yeah.
he was and an artist. He was all of those things. So Velvet called me and said Jimmy passed away, and we were like fucking crying. He said, "Listen, I've been approached to do a record deal." And I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Well, so I flew back to New York. We rehearsed, and we did a demo and submitted it, and we got a record deal from Gulf and Western. And you know who signed this? Michael Lang. So I was at Woodstock in the audience the year before. A year later, I'm signing a record deal with Michael Lang for his label Sunshine Records. How weird is that?
Wow. That is
With Velvet.
That's
So
awesome.
I'll double back on Woodstock in a minute. But because of that and meeting Michael Lang and being at Woodstock, that was a great story, and how I got the record deal and how I came to California. So I'll leave that there. So I used to go upstate New York pretty much most of the summers. I knew the area. So when I heard about Woodstock, I figured, okay, if I get upstate New York, and I went with a friend of mine from Brooklyn, we went there. We'll hang out first. I knew some girls. We went to see them first, and then we figure out how to get to Woodstock. So we went there 2 days before, and as I was leaving, and we figured we got to figure out how to get there. I had a good fortune of finding. Now you'll understand why. I found this guitar case in this girl's closet, and I asked her what's in the guitar case, and she said it's an empty case. She said, "If you want it, just take it. I have no need for it." It was an acoustic case, right?
Okay.
And I just said, "Okay, I'll take it. What do I know, right?"
Okay.
I didn't take my instant. I just took it,
Right.
So I was with my friend. We go, how are we going to get to what are we going to do to get to Woodstock? He says, "Well, why don't we just hitchhike, like we always did, back then everybody hitchhiked.
Right. You
Didn't
could.
matter, even though I had long hair and some people would go by and want to shoot me, uh, but I knew what it was like to be chased, by the way, back in that time period. Okay. It wasn't
Okay.
a piece of cake. And when the Vietnam War going on, there's a lot going on, and demonstrations. Anyway, we walked down to the road, and I said to my friend, "Who's playing Woodstock?" He goes, "I don't know." So we heard about Hendrix, we heard of The Who, and we heard of Sly. So we're looking at a telephone pole, and they had, posters up. And I'm looking, I said, "You ever hear of this band?" He goes, "Yeah." "You ever hear of this band?" "Yeah." "Country Joe?" "Yeah." "Did you ever hear of Santana?" He goes, "No." I go, "Okay. So listen, we're going to hitchhike, and we're going to tell the people." I had the guitar case. I'm going to tell the guy I'm the guitar player in Santana. Okay. So we start hitchhiking, and somebody comes by and goes, I said, "Listen, man, can we get us to the Woodstock area?" I said, "I play in this group, and we got to get there." And the guy goes, "Well, it's out of my way, but if you're playing, yeah." Okay. So that was my hustle. Got it?
Yes, I got it.
And to this day, I wonder if this guy told everybody he drove Carlos Santana to Woodstock. I had very long curly hair, by the way,
Yeah.
at the time.
Of course he told everybody he had Carlos Santana to struck. Of course.
Anyway, so that's how I got there. I mean, basically, we got near the town. Now, my idea was we didn't have any money. I said, let's sign up because Woodstock hadn't opened, and they still were hiring people to build stages and to build things.
Yep.
So I signed up. And my friend disappeared. I don't know what happened to him. So I signed up so I can work there. I haven't some nails. I did it. Half whatever. So I knew that I'd get a pass to be in Woodstock. And as a result of that, the next day, of course, everybody broke the gates down, and I didn't need it, but I had a pass. Okay. And that pass saved my life because I didn't know where I was going to stay. I didn't have any money. I was winging it like we all did back then. So because I had a pass, I met somebody that did security. And I said, "Do me a favor, can I work security? Can you get me a pass?" So working security, that means I had a trailer I could sleep in and also have sandwiches because everybody that worked there had basic, okay, number
Yep.
one.
Right.
And when it rained like hell, let me tell you, I thank God of that. It was a mud bowl the first day I was there. But anyway, didn't have any change of clothes or anything, just whatever. You know how it is. You just wing it. So I worked there. Next day I was there for it was every band I loved playing. Next day I was there again because I moved down the hill with my security pass. I was able to get another security pass. So by the time my favorite bands played, like Jimi Hendrix, Creedence and all that, and Sly was my favorite band.
Mm.
I mean, my bass playing. I love Sly's music, and as well as Crosby, Stills and Nash and Richie Havens, and
Sure,
they
sure.
had everybody I loved. I mean, all the blues bands were there. I loved 10 Years After. I had seen them, and the Who were one of my favorite bands. And John Entwistle was one of the people I looked up to for my bass playing. And I love the Who because it was so unpredictable.
Right.
And Keith Moon, forget it. And
Yeah.
Townsend, watching him kick Abby Hoffman off the stage was the greatest thrill of my life because he really did.
Yeah. No,
And
I've
nobody goes up on stage when Townsend's playing. And by the way, he kicked the fire commissioner off the stage at Fillmore when there was a fire there, and that's when they were all arrested afterwards. By the way, so anyway, just really quickly, so I saw the great bands, and Jimmy was a no show because the show went so late. So I figured, what the hell am I gonna, Jimmy may not show. So I went to sleep, woke up next morning. Everybody was leaving by then, but I started to hear something. It sounded like Jimmy, and I what the hell's going on? And it was Jimmy playing. I ran down the hill. I caught most of his set. I saw him do the Star Spangled Banner, which at the time was a joke, by
right.
the way,
Yeah.
because he would always throw, when he soloed, a lot of times he would throw in songs like melodies from like commercials or from movies, or you know what I mean. And by the way, every time I saw Jimmy, he would play differently
Yeah.
because he'd always improv.
And isn't it
And
and
he would
isn't it funny
go,
though that the Star Spangled Banner what he was known for, and for him it was just a throwaway. Pretty
go ahead. I'm
remarkable.
sorry.
It's interesting that
It,
that it was just a throwaway for him, and that was something that he became known for. Was that one
it's
performance?
unbelievable. Now, I didn't know they were making a movie. Number one, I mean, nobody did, and I'm there, and literally there were maybe, 1,000 people out of 200,000 because everybody left. Everybody didn't know Jimmy. Everybody had to go back to real life.
Right.
And I had no idea, but I'm watching it, and it was like pulling something out. What's he doing? And the more I listened, only Jimmy could make it orchestral
Yeah.
with feedback. I mean, it was masterful. He could have just did it on the spot.
Yeah.
And then he played the rest of the set, and it was amazing. So anyway, after that, I'm going, what am I going to do? I mean, how am I going to get home? So I went out, started hitchhiking. A Volkswagen bus with hippies pulled up, and I said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Brooklyn. He said, we're going to Queens, jump in. Smoke cash in the bus. Took a train home to Brooklyn. I walked in the door. My mom goes, where you been? I go, you won't believe it. So now that's the end of the story, except for one thing. 4 weeks later, I got a check for $40
For security.
because I signed. No, the one day I did construction, I signed up, so I got 8 hours of work. Right,
Yeah.
right. And I didn't say. I gave it to my mom because I said, "Listen, I'm sorry, I took money out of your bag to get my bass about 2 months ago. It wasn't my brother, it was me, and I'm paying you back here." Like we have those relationships where you go, I'll pay you back. She goes, yeah, sure. So anyway, I made do with my thing. So I got paid to be at Woodstock. How's
Good.
that?
Good for you. Good for you.
And I was fed, and I had some place to go to the bathroom.
And you were the
So
and you became the guitar player for Santana all in a single weekend.
and I will never live that down. But you know how we were with kids? It
Yeah.
wasn't a master plan. It was just like, well, how are we going to get there? Well, let's hitchhike, and we'll say we're in that band. It turned out to be a funny story. I had no idea Santana was going to be who they became anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, what a great show for them, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I didn't even think for a minute that anybody's going to think of anything I said to get there. So that's my story.
Oh, that's awesome.
So thanks for letting me share with you.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
you can imagine. So you can imagine a year later, literally a year later, I'm signing a record deal with Michael Lang. Then I was surrealistic.
Absolutely.
So as much as the Knack was surrealistic, being in a hit band, it was that foreign to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful that again we're talking, and I have a story to tell. But the music business is wonderful, and I'm so glad I got. I was going to be a baseball player, and I gave up a scholarship to play baseball because it was born after seeing the Beatles and after seeing all these groups, and then Sergeant Pepper came out. That's when I quit playing baseball. Just so you know, okay?
Well, that I knew about the baseball, but I didn't realize it was Sergeant Pepper that got you to quit.
Well, I'm at a game. No, seriously, I swear to God, I'm at a game, a high school game. It came out, and I'm just saying, forget it. I mean, that album was so otherworldly. It
Yeah.
wasn't that Revolver was, and Revolver blew my mind completely. When that came out, it was like the world was like that album changed the world.
Hey Prescott, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. Like I said, I've been a fan for a long time.
Thank you so much.
And best of luck with the new Knack record. It sounds fantastic.
Yeah, and it is a good album, and I implore your listeners to give it a listen, and check out some of the YouTube stuff. The Carnegie Hall concert we did is on YouTube. They have all of it. Unfortunately, it didn't come out yet officially, but you'll see what we sounded like back then.
Yeah.
And it was pretty cool.
That's
and I'm
great.
grateful. And there's a lot of other YouTube clips too.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Nice to meet you, Prescott. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to check out Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok for regular updates. You can also email me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks again to Metro, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee for their support. But most of all, thanks to all of you for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast.